we're juggling three balls constantly. Right. And what are the three balls? It's our career, our work.
Yeah.
It's our family, our relationships, husband, wife, children, parents, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Then the third ball is this passion we have for our sport.
Yeah.
Those three balls. Okay. What I believe is that it's almost impossible to have all three of those flying really high at the one time. Especially if you have young children. But the reality is, look, if on the road you want to be in the top 10 at a UCI Grandfondo World Series, just the qualifier races, let alone the World Championships.
Yeah.
At a very objective level, your power numbers, your physiology, you have to be as good as a guy who would get a contract as a 23 or 24-year-old. Okay,
right.
Under 23.
Yeah.
So at a very objective level, your power numbers have to be close to a guy who's racing pro-continental level. Having the support of your husband, your wife, your kids, because this is a journey that you go on together. You don't, it's not just me, it's we. When you're doing the gym work and the plyometrics, it's very grueling. I mean, it's hard on your body, right? So you really need recovery. So what I'm doing during this period is really polarized training, right? So what does that mean?
I am Baiki Venki and this is the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, time management, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future episodes. If you have any suggestions for guests on the show, leave a comment on the YouTube channel or join the Working Athlete community on Facebook to leave us a message. I'll put the links for that in the show notes. Today's guest is a world-class working athlete, an Australian living in Belgium. He is a management guru who graduated from London Business School and is an adjunct professor at Antwerp Management School. He is a Tedx speaker, a stand-up strategist, a husband, a father, a super strong cyclist, a winner of some of the top amateur UCI grandfondo races around the world, and an all-round amazing guy. He recently started a cycling channel on YouTube called This Cycling Life, where he interviews some of the top cyclists from around the world discussing all things cycling. His name is Jamie Anderson. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast, Jamie. It's such a pleasure having you on the show.
Well, Venki, it's such a pleasure for me. And, I never imagined when you and I met on the tour of Nilgiris all those years ago that here we would be talking together on your new vlog and podcast. It's cool.
Same here, Jamie. Same here. Let us start with talking a bit about your cycling channel on YouTube, This Cycling Life. What is the channel about and what do you want to do with the channel?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, Venki, I spend most of my life teaching and speaking at conferences and events and stuff like that. And my field is creativity and leadership. But of course, as you've explained already, I'm also a passionate cyclist. And I guess for a long time, for many years, I kind of had this idea, this dream to combine my expertise kind of in research and academia and speaking and stuff with my passion for cycling. To interview cyclists and people involved with the world of, high level cycling, whether that's, professionals or amateurs, about what cycling means for them, but not so much around like who's going to win this year's Tour de France or, tell me the tactics for the Tour of Flanders or something like that, because there's loads of people doing that kind of stuff. My interest was more on the human side, for example, I've interviewed lots of DSs, people like Matt White, Doug Ryder,
right.
About what leadership is for them, and how do you build a high performing culture, for example. So, on that side, it's been really interesting because, of course, these guys are in the world of cycling, but actually the lessons that they share and the wisdom they share are really relevant also, for the rest of us, or for people in business, for example. So
Right.
that's been one part of it. And then the other part that I'm really curious about is, again, having worked in the world of business and business schools for a long time, is just high performance as an individual. So again, what I've been doing is interviewing lots of, current, former champions about what is a champion's mindset, right? What does it take to be a winner? And again, of course, the interesting thing there is those insights that we gain are not just relevant for sport, they're also relevant for many other aspects of life as well. So that's the idea with the channel. The idea with the channel is to give new insights and lessons and stuff, but lessons that are not just relevant for sport, that are relevant for other aspects of life as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think that is really useful for a lot of us. Those are. And now you have one of the most inspirational origin stories I have ever heard, right? Let us start with that. How did this management guru become this strongest cyclist, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, you're alluding to my TED talk, I think, and I did share on the TED stage my kind of life story, and I mean that's really amazing for me now, because I was looking at the numbers the other day, and I think it's been watched more than 100,000 times, and I'm almost contacted on a weekly basis by people who've watched that talk and reach out to me to have a chat or ask me questions about how I made the shift myself, because I did make a big shift in my career about 10 years ago. Pretty
Yeah.
much leaving my full-time job as an academic to go independent, to work independent. But a big part of that, of course, was to chase my dream as a cyclist. And that story started, when I was a kid, because, I grew up in a small country town in Australia. But the amazing thing about that is, although this town had like 17,000 people, I mean, I know many of your audience in India, for them, like, when I'm visiting India, because I love India and I visit usually in the non-COVID times, I'm in India 5 or 6 times a year. And, I know you guys, you think that a small town in India is like 100,000 people or something. But I grew up in a really small town, like 15,000 people. But in that town, there was a really amazingly dedicated cycling club, really inspiring guys. And out of this little town of 15,000 people where I live, we had Olympic champions, Commonwealth Games champions, people who went on to professional careers. So as a kid in that environment, I was quite inspired. So I raced my bike from the time I was like 9, 10 years old on the BMX track. And then I went on to the velodrome and then onto the road.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I was 16, 17, I was racing state, national level. So I had quite a bit of talent. But unfortunately, life draws certain cards. I grew up in a family where I had a bit of a complicated dad. He had problems with alcohol. Later in my teenage years, he also had mental illness, and it was a real struggle, actually, trying to juggle kind of my sporting dreams and passions with this very unstable family environment. And at the same time, trying to finish high school and think about studies and stuff like that. So eventually I came to the conclusion that, I won't say it was all too hard, but sustaining that sporting performance, given the other pressures, were very difficult. And at the end of the day, at the end of my 12th grade in Australia, I finished my high school and I got offered a scholarship for university.
Right.
So, that was just a choice I had to make. Was I going to try to chase this dream in the absence of, in a way, having support from my family, because we didn't have the financial backing, in a way, to pursue a professional cycling career, to come to Europe, for example, or to take, in a way, the safe option of accepting the scholarship and going off to university. And that's eventually what I did.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, saying that, it was not really the choice that I wanted to make, because my dream was always, from the time I was a kid, to be a cyclist.
Right.
But life didn't work out that way at the time. So that's pretty much led into a 20-year academic career where I eventually went on and became a professor. Yeah.
Right. So what you were doing really well as a management consultant and management professor. And what made you, take that decision? I'm sure that is a really tough decision to give all that up that you worked for nearly 20 years to start some other journey, right?
Yeah, Venki, I mean, I think it's a difficult, it's like, when as an athlete, right, when you're a sports person, and especially as a cyclist, I have this conversation often with cyclists, and I'm incredibly impressed with the professional cyclists that I speak with and former professional cyclists, and they all have something in common. To make it as a cyclist, you really have to have a very strong work ethic, right?
Right.
Because it's not like you can just, if you want to be a road cyclist, it's not like you can just train an hour a day. No, I mean, if you really want to race, even at my level now at the Masters, and you go for the UCI Grandfondo World Series level, you're training 3-4 hours a day in those build-ups for those big races, right? So you have to be extremely disciplined, right, to fit in
Yeah.
that training. So even as a kid, when I was 14, 15 years old, I was training 2 or 3 hours every day, and I was doing my studies, and I had a part-time job. So you see, I think, this work ethic that people have.
Mm.
And the other thing, of course, that we have as athletes, and even as teenagers, you have this ability to set goals for yourself.
Right.
You have the guts to compete. Just being there on the starting line, that already takes courage, because
Yeah.
you lose more than you win.
Yeah.
So you learn what it is to suffer. You learn what it is to be resilient, to get up after you've fallen down or you've lost or whatever it might be. And of course, you learn to set goals for yourself, right? So
Yeah.
you're looking at your season and you're planning these goals, and then you're organizing the things you need to do to get there. So I think doing that for almost 10 years as a kid, from 9 years old pretty much to 19 years old when I went off to university,
Mhm.
of course, that then gave me a big advantage, I think, when I went to university and I had all of that ability to set goals and discipline, stuff like that. And then I took that into my career, right?
Yeah.
So that doesn't really answer your question, but I'll
No,
get there.
but
But
yeah. Yeah.
what it meant was that I was a really motivated, driven, disciplined person, and I set goals for myself.
Correct.
However, I think what happens to us in our lives, in our careers, is you go off to university, you start to study, and you're a high achiever, you're a high performer. So
Right.
people reward you and pat you on the back, and they say, oh, this is possible, that is possible. So of course, after my undergrad, I went on to a master's degree and then on to further graduate studies. And what I was doing actually was being really driven in a way to prove myself, like to win, to be on the top step of the podium, whether it was in the academic setting or then later in my career.
Mm.
But eventually what I was doing, I guess, is like people was telling me, oh, that's the good path, like, because initially when I went to university, I studied history and politics and literature that I was interested in. But then I realized, oh, hang on, I'm not going to make much money with that. So then I eventually went more into business studies and
Yeah.
eventually business school.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the pinnacle in the business school? Like what's the most prestigious? Again, like being competitive, it was strategy.
Right.
So I pursued corporate strategy,
Yeah.
and eventually became a professor in strategy. All right.
Right.
However, it's like I was never really like passionate about strategy. Like I
Right.
was really good at it, and
Yeah.
I could write award-winning case studies and publish articles in the top journals and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was something, so what I'm trying to say to you is I think there's a difference between this extrinsic motivation, everyone telling you that's a good path and that's a good job and that's a good career.
Yeah.
And it's all too easy as a young high achiever when you don't know what you want, when you don't know really what your passions are, just to follow that
Right.
guidance from others. And that's what
Yeah.
I did.
Oh.
So, long answer to your question, but eventually what happened is, I became this top international professor and strategist.
Right.
But then by my late 30s, I realized, what the hell am I doing? Because I'm not really inspired by this field. I'm not
Yeah.
really curious even about it. So
Yeah.
that created that moment then for really a bit of a crisis for me,
Right. Right.
actually.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of that realization that although you will always have that in within yourself, but it came welled up and said, okay, what am I doing? And then you decided to switch gears and pursue your passion.
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, at that stage, I didn't know professionally what my passion was really, like I just knew that. And not only that, it wasn't just that, it wasn't that just that the strategy stuff didn't excite me so much. It
Mhm.
was the environment, of these academic institutions, like, oh
Right.
man, professors are the most egotistical, self-centered, people you can work with. And I was just in these environments, these top tier business schools, where there was a lot of politics, a lot of ego, rivalry, backstabbing, climbing over other people. Because, in these environments like the top tier business schools, it's basically up or out, right? I mean, you
Right.
publish, you build your research base, your record, but you're not encouraged to collaborate with other people, right? Because, like if you co-author a paper, you get less recognition than individually.
Right.
So it's a weird environment, like where you're in a business environment, in a work environment, but actually your colleagues are your competitors, right?
Correct.
Because if the business school brings in, maybe 15 assistant professors, only 2 of those make it to full professor, right? So it's
Right.
really, and I didn't like that. I
Mm.
didn't like that need to have to be competitive and aggressive against, in a way, my colleagues, which was a bit crazy.
Correct.
Lots of things there. So that was also, but then the other thing that I started to realize was that, again, I think it goes back to my childhood, was that, because I grew up with there's nothing like, when I say growing up in poverty in Australia, I didn't grow up in poverty, but we were poor. We didn't have enough often to make ends meet. Now, I know, again, in the context of India, that, like, we were still very lucky, because in Australia you have a social welfare net and you have free education and healthcare and stuff, but we did it
Yeah.
really tough.
Yeah.
We did it really tough. And so that was always at the back of my mind as well. Like I said, why did I leave my passion for history and literature and political science and stuff? Because I thought, I'm not going to make money with that. And I really want to make a lot of money, because I don't want my kids to go through what I went through.
Right.
So that was also a driver for me in my professional career, to make a lot of money. And that's why I ended up at London Business School and I started my consulting company. But then, honestly, I was really driven by money, because
Yeah.
that was for me a way to rank myself. Or, it's not like cycling where you get a medal or a cup or a jersey. For me, it was like, I want to be earning more than my colleagues, the people around me, and ranking myself against them. But what that then resulted in was, me like becoming really like a workaholic.
Yeah.
And again, in your 20s or 30s, I think that's okay, right? I mean, that's what you do,
Right.
because you're establishing yourself from kind of mid 20s to mid 30s. But then by the time I was in my late 30s, it wasn't just about me anymore. I had 3 kids, 3 young children, all of them under the age of 6. I was married,
Yeah.
and I was being a horrible, horrible husband and father, because I was never home. I was working way too hard. I was traveling all the time. And yeah, so that was also a realization that it wasn't just that I wasn't happy professionally. I also wasn't happy with the way
Right.
I was being as a husband and a father. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So basically, that all these factors contributed to that switch. So what are the changes that you did around that time to uh, you know uh, get rid of those feelings and feeling better?
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing was, I just realized I had to slow down, and for me, what I realized actually was the number one priority was my family, my wife and
Mhm.
my kids. And so um, initially what I did actually is I went into the business school and said, look, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to keep, having all this high pressure of the senior role and the publication pressure and the, all of the other stuff that I was doing that I hated, like being on committees and recruitment selection panels and budget, because I was a relatively senior faculty member, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I went into business school and said, listen, this is what I want to do. What I like doing is teaching. I like people, I like writing case studies, but all that hardcore academic research, I don't actually enjoy that.
Yeah.
So what I want to be is just like, I just want to work like 50%, you know,
Okay.
and just teach and just do some more, you know, practical research and writing. And they said, no, that's not the way we do it here. And you're either tenure track or you're out.
Okay.
So that was a bit unfortunate.
Mm.
So basically then I resigned from the business school where I was, but already even before that, I was having some conversations with other business schools. I was doing some work with some folks in India, actually,
Right.
a fantastic organization called Eruditus Executive Education, who I still work with to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And what I started to realize was that there were other professional channels for me,
Right.
to basically earn a bit of money to pay the rent and keep my kids fed and stuff.
Yeah.
But what I realized is that I needed a break. And I decided I was going to take 3 to 6 months just to step away and work a lot less
Mm-hmm.
and think about stuff.
Okay.
The other thing there, of course, was that, at that time it was just before I was 40 years old. So, I'd been working for 15 years and, my wife and I, we had some money in the bank and we had enough, like that we wouldn't have to worry for 6 months or a year,
Right.
that we could cover that. So,
Yeah.
again, with my kind of financial obsession, I did a budget and I thought about all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I realized, hey, you know what, we're okay. We're okay.
Yeah.
So that was the plan. Actually, it was the plan not to have a plan, just to take
Yeah.
these months off with some of this work, a little bit of work booked.
Right.
And then, of course, the other thing, and this was in 2009, like I was watching TV one day and then I saw this World Masters Games in Sydney.
Right.
It was on Eurosport and I was like blown away. I was like, hang on, like, wow, there's this whole world of masters sport out there.
Right.
Because I hadn't raced my bike for 20 years,
Yeah.
And then, but in the meantime, of course, for the 20 years that I hadn't raced my bike, every year I'd watch the Tour de France and the Giro and the Vuelta and, the Tour of Flanders. And so I still had this fire in my belly for cycling. And then when I saw this thing on TV, I thought, wow, why don't I go back?
Yeah.
That's something I always dreamed of. So that was also then part of the plan was, okay, I'm going to go back and start racing my bike again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that how long did it take for that move to do less work and then start cycling again and targeting those masters games and stuff?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how long did it take for you to have that idea and to execute and make it to the start line of that those races?
Yeah, well, I guess there was kind of three kind of pathways, parallel, right? One was, again, getting back and being a dad and, spending a lot of time with my kids. And that was awesome. And so, taking that 3-6 months off was really, really great just to spend time, because my kids were like 2 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Now, of course, then, I also had time then to ride my bikes because the kids were in kindergarten or preschool and stuff like that. So I started riding my bike a lot. And I realized I was horribly unfit, because I was like 75 kilos. And so 10 kilograms more than I was when I was a competitor. I'm a pretty small guy. So some people would hit 75 and say, oh, that's not so heavy.
That's not the...
I'm like 160, 8 centimeters tall. So I was pretty heavy. And it's like, it's a weird feeling, like when you've been an athlete in your youth and then to get back into sport and just feel like horrible, like how far you are away from what you were before.
Correct.
But I kind of had this belief that, I kind of like saw myself as like a block of marble, like Michelangelo. And I knew that there was an athlete in there somewhere, right?
Right.
It would just take a lot of chiseling away at the block, which is what I'd become,
right,
to kind of unearth the athlete within again.
Right.
And that did take a lot of time. It was, we moved back to Belgium because my wife wanted to be closer to her family. And I saw it would be a great place, of course, for cycling.
Yeah.
Nice place for our kids to be. We rented a house in the countryside a little bit. So really nice environment for the children, great schools nearby. And I had a beautiful place to ride my bike. So I started riding. But I had my first race, I think, like a year. So middle of 2000, it was the summer of 2010. Okay. So I had my first race in Belgium. It's like the level in Belgium is unbelievable, right? I mean, because it's basically, Belgium's a relatively small country. So you get the best riders at every race because it's only an hour to drive, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically the masters level here in Belgium, the guys that I race against are guys who win world champion level.
Right.
These are grandfondo world champions and stuff. So,
absolutely.
So I never forget my first race. It was like, I think 10 laps of of a 7-8 kilometer circuit, and I lasted for 2.
Yeah.
I was dropped, in 2 laps. And that was my whole first year of racing. I mean, I never finished a race. I would last maybe half, and then I'd be dropped from the peloton. And the thing in Belgium is, because you're racing on these circuits, if you get dropped, they basically pull you out of the race.
Correct.
Because there could be another age group coming behind you and stuff. So it's really a bit demoralizing, right? Because you not only get dropped from the peloton,
Yeah.
you then have the commissaire shouting at you out
To get out
of the race.
Yeah.
To get out, get off the road. So that was my first year, pretty much. And I think it was 2.5 years after I started back and steadily building up my training and learning, how to race again. I got my first top 5. I finished 4th in a
Wow.
race.
Wow.
I got in a breakaway with a group of 5 guys, and that's when I realized, okay, I can do this. It's possible.
Right.
But it was 2.5 years.
Wow.
And the World Masters game. So I started this sort of comeback, if you like, in end of 2009. The World Masters Games were 2013. So that's what I was then going for. Yeah. Now, in parallel to that, it was like the professional stuff as well, because what I started to explore was like, what other work can I do that can bring in a decent enough income to support my family, and yet would not involve having the stress and the, all the pressure and stuff that I had before.
Right.
And that's kind of where I almost by accident discovered the whole keynote speaking thing, because what I was doing is I was going out on my bike and listening to podcasts and listening to TED Talks.
Right.
And I thought, hang on a second, these TED Talks are really cool, and I have ideas and stuff. So I'm going to give a TED Talk, that became part of my goal.
Right.
And then I realized there was this whole world out there of keynote speaking, which was kind of like being a professor,
Right.
sharing your knowledge to a group of people. But instead of having to go through all of those horrible things like committee meetings and research and stuff like that, basically you get an agent, you write a book, and then you become a keynote speaker. And that journey started to happen pretty much in parallel with my cycling journey, to actually try to establish myself, not just as a cyclist,
Right.
but as a TED speaker and a keynote speaker as well. Yeah.
Awesome. And when I met you first time in 2016 in tour of Nilgiris, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really struck me was you were more than eligible for to be in the masters category, but you raced in elite category, as in so the age groups was under 35 and over 35, and I was competing in over 35 groups, and you were competing with Niels, who was really strong in the elite category, and you were really strong, and I mean, Niels is a very strong cyclist, almost a pro.
I mean, the guy's world level.
World level.
He's had top 10 results at UCI World Grandfondo Championship.
Yeah, and you were so close to him, even with all that age gap, and I was like, wow, this guy is really something. And now I could see the kind of work you have put in from 2010, coming in and chiseling away at that block, and how that athlete has emerged out of that, all that work. Now, the another thing that really struck with me was, I think in 2017, in one of the rest days, you gave a presentation, a small talk to the all the TFN participants about what is that? I don't get that name, about the priority, choosing your goals and the priority matrix or something like that. Do you remember that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Look, I mean, a few things. I mean, the first thing is that, what I started to realize, coming back into cycling at a high level, was that the reality is, even at master's level, right? Okay. Now, when you met me, I think I was still in the M4 category, something like that. but listen, at the UCI Grandfondo world level, or I've also raced on the track. Last year I did Manchester. I did the points race there. But the reality is, look, if on the road you want to be in the top 10 at a UCI Grandfondo World Series, just the qualifier races, let alone the World Championships.
Yeah.
At a very objective level, your power numbers, your physiology, you have to be as good as a guy who would get a contract as a 23 or 24-year-old. Okay.
Right.
Under 23.
Yeah.
So at a very objective level, your power numbers have to be close to a guy who's racing pro continental level.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just to be in the mix. So,
yeah.
When people say masters or veteran cycling, and they're looking at us as like some kind of guys who are not as good or not as strong. Okay, we're not going to win the Tour de France. We're not at that level of the world tour.
Yeah.
But we're certainly at that sort of pro continental level. So what I started to understand was that, of course, to build yourself up to that level, for me, it took about 5 years, right? I mean, I got a bronze medal at the World Masters in 2013. I think I was a bit lucky, I kind of survived to the end. I have a good sprint and I was there, but I still wasn't as good as many of the top guys. And then it took me another 3 years, I would say, like to 2016 when you met me, 2017, where I was really reaching, I think, that ceiling of my performance.
Right.
Like what is physiologically possible.
Right.
And what that involved, of course, was making choices about life. So the other thing I started to realize was that if I wanted to race UCI Grandfondo World Series level, then you have to live like a professional. Right. I mean, you can't have a full-time job and a family and prepare yourself to compete at that level.
Right.
To race 160-kilometer races, 5 hours, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So what I talked to you all about was you have to look at your life as a journey, and a long journey.
Yeah.
And if at the age of 45 or 50, or at the moment, I interviewed a guy last week who's 62 years old.
Wow.
He's taken early retirement to go back to win a world championship in cycling, right?
Wow.
Guy called Dieter Vorbeck, fascinating guy. But the point I'm making here is this. So what I spoke to all you about was, okay, if it's really, really important for you, really meaningful for you to try to see and discover your potential as an athlete, then why not take a year out or 2 years in your mid 40s to have a crack at it? Now, I'm not saying you take a year out that you stop working completely and you divorce your wife or husband and, no. But what I'm saying is that what I do now is, my life is essentially like, is based around a 4-year cycle. All right. And I've been doing this now. I'm going into my 11th year of doing this. And what I do is I plan around every 4 years to be at a world level. Now, why is that? Because I can't be at a world level on the road every single year because I can't train 20 hours a week, week in, week out every single year. Okay. So what I do is I have a period of, like when you met me 2016, I was living like a pro, right? Because why? I just turned like 45. I was going up into the new age group classification. And my decision was I'm going to go for world level results, multi-day stage race results for that year. So in that year, I only worked 30% of the amount that I would in a regular year. I was still a pretty good husband and dad because I was home a lot, although I was tired and grumpy quite a bit. But I really cut back on my working. My income dropped by maybe 70% in that year, 2016, 2017. But it was a choice I made because I was keeping in mind I still have 20 more years to work and earn money and stuff like that, right? Right. So what I did then, when you met me, 2016, 17, I was living like a pro, and I had 23 international podium results in those 2 years. Wow. Okay, UCI World Series races. I won the Giro Sardinia, won the Tour of Norway. I won a whole bunch of stuff. But then, of course, second half 2017, 18, I had to get back to working and I had to earn money, right? Yeah. So then I dramatically cut back on my cycling. I did very little real high level competition in that year. Then, 2019, which was last year, again, I need to make money. I'm working more. My career's going great on the keynote speaking and all that kind of stuff. So what I did then was say, okay, I want to get back into competition. I need to start getting that base back again. But what I did then was I targeted time trials. and
Okay.
track. So
Right.
instead of having to train 20 hours a week, it was more like 10 hours a week, but actually, again, reaching that international level. I won the European Masters Time Trial Championship last year. I finished top 10 in the world points race on the track in Manchester.
Yeah.
So does that make sense? Like
It
it's
does.
juggling.
It
It's
is.
priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you, it's also about timing your figuring out your priorities at any given point of time, and then balancing it out with the others. So if your goals and your work doesn't don't speak to each other, as in, if they are competing for the same resources, which
Yeah.
are limited, like time and energy, right?
Sure.
Then you are going to be in a bit of a problem spot. But if
Yeah,
you are,
I mean, look, you're going to get a divorce or something, like it's seriously. I know these guys in their 40s and women,
yeah,
who get divorced because here's the thing, Venki, it's very simple, right? We're juggling three balls
right,
constantly, right? And
right,
what are the three balls? It's our career, our work,
yeah,
it's our family, our relationships, husband, wife, children, parents, whatever it might be.
yeah,
Then the third ball is this passion we have for our sport.
yeah,
Yeah. Those three balls. Okay. What I believe is that it's almost impossible to have all three of those flying really high at the one time,
yeah,
especially if you have young children,
yeah,
because they take a lot of your time. So what you have to decide is you have to make trade-offs, right? And that's what
right,
I'm constantly doing is adjusting those three. Okay.
right,
So like I said, when I met you 2016, 17, what was I doing? I was being an amazing cyclist because I was training 20 hours a week.
yeah,
I was at home a lot because when I wasn't training, I was resting or being at home and stuff. So I was being still a pretty good dad, I think a good husband. Although my
yeah,
wife was complaining, because like every time we get in bed, I just like fall asleep, I was so tired all the time. Right? So she was complaining, like, when am I going to get some action here? Like that and stuff. It was really funny. And then, my kids are like, oh, Dad, you're so grumpy. Like I'd be shouting at them and stuff. And I never forget my son, Charlie, one day he said, Papa, you're tired and grumpy. We shouldn't be having this conversation right now, so that was funny. But actually, it was pretty good. And, because we were having holidays together off to France and Spain for racing, they were coming with me and supporting me. And that was really amazing. But of course, as I said, in those 2 years, my income went down by 70%. Okay.
yeah,
I earned enough to pay the mortgage and then, have some simple vacations and stuff. But again, I'm thinking, okay, that's all right because, I've still got another 20 years to make money. So if I
right,
make a little bit less in these 2 years, it's okay,
yeah,
And I explained that, I had that conversation with my wife and my kids. They understand, because I don't want my kids thinking, oh, Dad's unemployed. We're going to starve, we're not going to get our, PlayStation for Christmas or something like that.
right,
So I had to explain that to them. And
yeah,
they're on board with it. They're on board
yeah,
with it. So that's also super important that you talk to the people around you. Right?
yeah,
Okay, this is
yeah,
my dream as an athlete. Like, when I told my wife in 2009, right, I want to be a world champion, and she's like, what the hell? Like, because she never knew me as an athlete, right? She knew me as a
yeah,
professor and like I was doing some gym and stuff. And then I pulled out these photos of me as a teenager racing, and I was like crying and emotional because it brought back all these flooding of memories for me. And she was like, wow, I never knew that. But if that's so important to you,
yeah,
then go for it.
yeah,
So that's what I'll say as well. Having the support of your husband, your wife, your kids,
yeah,
because this is a journey that you go on together. You don't. It's not just me. It's
yeah,
we, and that's how it's we. It's how we do it. Yeah. Yeah. Don't
absolutely.
don't tell my wife I told you that thing. By the way, she'd be terribly embarrassed if she knew I told you that. But it was true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, so that is a great point you make about prioritizing, and the example you told about juggling those three balls, and
Mhm.
not if you have all those three balls up in the in the air, one has to be up and one has to be down, and at different levels for the juggling to be continuing, right?
Mm.
So that's a great
Honestly, I mean, it's like I had a friend, a good mate of mine, who was, Team GB, Great Britain level, similar
example.
age to me and everything like that. And, I spoke to him, and we were in touch quite regularly, and then he was like making a cycling comeback, in his mid-40s, and really, really wanting to do it. But there was a problem, because at the same time he was doing that, he was making a shift in his career. So he was working in the world of media, journalism, in the financial world. He's an oil and gas kind of specialist, working for some of these big companies that do research on these regions and industries and stuff. So he'd taken a big job. What that involved was him working in the city of London. He had a 1.5-hour commute each day to work. You imagine, on the train.
Wow.
So high pressure job, big commute. He's got kids who are in high school, and like going through the later stages of high school, so also needing support with their homework and planning of their studies and stuff like that. He's got a wife, and I'm like, Andy, that ain't gonna work, man. You wanting to world level at UCI road races, and having this high pressure job and having these family commitments, you're gonna burn out. You're going to burn out, man. And the guy was like waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning to do 1.5 hours before his commute. Then he was coming home after work, and and it didn't work. It didn't work out for him, because he was trying to keep all, and his relationship was coming under pressure with his wife. His kids weren't happy. So you can't do that. You can't do that. It's not fair on you, and it's not fair on those around you.
That is a very, very important point. So,
but also, Venki, I think there's a real important point here as well. And again, look, I've been traveling to India for 20 years, right? And honestly, I know, what it's that the social welfare net, the responsibility of parents, it's all there in India, right? And look, so don't get me wrong, like, this is not possible for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you're basically got a job where you are just making ends meet, and you can't put money aside, and you can't, for example, do what I do, because I have the ability to work as an independent. Right? So I have the possibility to give keynote speeches, or to do a few days of consulting here and here. I'm not on a 9-to-5 job, or 9 to 7, or like many people in India would be. So here's my advice there. Okay. But it's like this, again, so it has to be right for you. But again, what I do say to people, even who are in that situation, like my friend Andy was, make a choice, Andy, what's more important for you right now? Is it career? Or is it this dream to realize this potential you have as an athlete?
Right.
And if the career is the thing which is pulling right now, then guess what? You still have another 40 years to ride your bike. Okay? So just put it aside for now. Come back to it. However, if that fire inside you for your sport is so strong, even in your early or mid 40s, and there's this unfinished business you want to realize, you don't want to wait. Then it's just about a matter of planning the financial stuff. And planning the career to say, you know what, I'm going to take this mid-career break, and I'm going to plan for that financially, but it's going to be a plan, and I'm going to do it. Right? But you have to do that as a plan, because you can't do it all. That's I hope that makes sense.
It does. It's also about looking at where you are in your career and life, and then choosing the goals accordingly, right? So people who cannot give up their 9-to-5 job, or it is not practical for everybody, right? So they can look at their schedule and say, okay, I am able to give 10 hours a week for training and stuff, and then there will be enough races for them to
Sure. I mean, that's the other thing, it's like, there's two aspects to this, right? Like, for example, I interviewed just last week, this guy, Dieter Vorbeck, right? And Dieter Vorbeck is 62 years old.
Right.
When he was a teenager, he was really top level in Germany, and then West Germany. But like me, we had a very similar kind of decision process. He decided to go off to academics, and then he went to an amazing corporate career. He became CTO of one of the biggest telecom companies in Belgium. I'm sorry, in Germany. So this is a guy who was, top C-level executive, board member, all that stuff.
Right.
But guess what? You know, when he was getting already into his 40s and 50s, he started to feel this fire for his cycling again.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
was riding with his friends on the weekend and going on holiday cycling, but not competing, because he said, no, I want to go as far as I can in my career.
Yeah.
But then he reached that level in his career.
Yeah.
And what has he done? You know, in
Yeah.
the last 12 months, he
Yeah.
has taken early retirement, you know,
Yeah.
not to work to 67 as he can, but to
Yeah.
say, you know what? I've
Yeah.
done my corporate stuff. I'm
Yeah.
financially stable. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to wait another 5 years. I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
And he's an amazing guy, right? Because
Right.
he made the choices.
Yeah.
He did his corporate life.
Yeah.
And now he's saying, now is my time to be. And now he's living like a pro at 60 years old. It's awesome. You know,
Yeah.
it's awesome
Yeah.
to see that.
Yeah. Very
So that's the
inspirational.
first thing, you know. The first thing is it's never too late
Mm-hmm.
to chase your dreams as an athlete. Never
Yeah.
too late, because you know at the road cycling UCI Grandfondo World Championships, they now have a 100 plus age group category, right? You know,
Wow.
it's mind boggling.
Yeah.
It's mind boggling, right? So keep that perspective. The second thing is exactly what you say. You know, if you do have the pressures of family and work, then set sporting goals for yourself that fit with the time you have available.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, as I told you last year, lots of great stuff happening in my career. My children are now all teenagers. They're needing me around as well a lot in terms of supporting them with their studies and school and thinking. And so, you know, last year I was training 8 or 10 hours a week,
Yeah.
fitting that in around other stuff. But
Mm.
I won the European Masters Time Trial Championships,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
why? Because that race was 22 kilometers.
Yeah.
It's going really fast for like 30 minutes. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, that doesn't take to get to that level. It doesn't take 20 hours training a week. No,
Yeah.
you know, you can. So that's also a mistake that a lot of cyclists make, right? Like when I was in India, like I see all these guys doing the tour of Nilgiris and they're doing 160K stages and they want to win, but they've only got 10 hours a week for training.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, so look, don't get me wrong. The Tour of Nilgiris is wonderful to do, wonderful to compete at, but don't expect you're going to win it with
Yeah.
8 hours training a week. You know, maybe say in the tour, I'm going to go for some shorter stages and time trials and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
Awesome. So, great insights there, Jamie. Now, let us talk a little bit about Tour of Nilgiris and how did you get to know about the tour and how did you end up doing those 2 years?
Yes, so you know, as I said, I've been visiting India since 2000. So 20 years I've been back and forth to India,
Yeah.
and over that time, of course, I was initially teaching at the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad,
IBS.
but then exactly, so I was teaching regularly there. So I got, you know, I had good contacts in Hyderabad, of course, and then about 7-8 years ago, I started working with a group of guys in Mumbai called Eruditus, Executive Education, and they're the guys in India, and they host and market a lot of programs for schools like Kellogg and Wharton and INSEAD.
Right.
So I started teaching for them,
Mm-hmm.
and I was starting to do stuff in Bangalore, and
Okay.
through my connections in Bangalore. Work connections, you know, I realized there was a cycling club there, and I started to get connected with some of the cyclists in Bangalore. I met a young Indian guy actually called Sarvesh, who you know,
Sarvesh,
some guy.
yeah.
So I met Sarvesh, and Sarvesh was really keen to come and race in Belgium. So we kind of helped through some connections to bring him over to Belgium. He stayed with my family for a while and stuff. So through the connection with Sarvesh, I heard about the Tour of Nilgiris, and then I signed up. And it was just an awesome experience. I loved it. I really loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the some of the things that you remember from those 2 years of Tour of Nilgiris that stood out?
Okay, the first thing that you know, because you guys have been cycling in India for years, right? So you understand it. You know, like for some Western guy coming to India, we don't know that stuff, right? Like, so for example, you know, like when you're cycling, okay, I mean, cycling in the cities in India, I don't know how you guys do it. I have the utmost respect and admiration for your courage and persistence and stuff, right? So the first thing for me was like getting out of Bangalore was like it was like Grand Theft Auto on bicycles, like it was like just survival and zigzagging and zipping forward, and suddenly people coming from the left and right, and random dogs chasing you and everything, and cars honking, and boy, it was an adventure. But that wasn't the worst bit, Actually, the thing that you guys didn't tell me was when you were riding through like the backwaters of Kerala,
Yeah.
and you're on this beautiful road, quiet and stuff like that, and then you come to a small village. What you guys didn't tell me is that people don't look out. They just walk onto the road right in front of you, right? Like because they're used to vehicles that make noise, right?
Absolutely,
noise.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So as a cycle, you're very quiet. So I had these experiences of just like cycling through these small villages and people just walking right in front of me, and at one stage I was with Niels and we were going through a village, and a lady on a motorbike just came straight out, and I crashed right into her because she just didn't look.
Yeah.
She didn't look.
Yeah.
So of course then what you guys also didn't tell me is you never stick around after an accident, especially if you knock a lady off the bike, right? So we're there, and this lady's on the ground, and her motorbike is scratched and stuff. And of course, according to us, it's her fault, because she didn't look.
Yeah.
But then, and of course, Niels is wanting to have a big argument with everybody because my bike wheel was buckled and everything. And then some of the guys arrived. I can't remember who. And they're like, okay, guys, we just get the hell out of here now.
Yes.
We just split, We're not going to, because suddenly there's a big crowd coming and people are shouting at the motorbike being damaged. And so we just took off, we were gone. So that was pretty crazy. And the whole thing about these, like in Belgium and Australia, dogs are nice, like you have dogs and you can say, hello, puppy, you give them a little pat. In India, these dogs are they're ferocious, man. So suddenly you're going through this beautiful, again, you're in Tamil Nadu or something, you're riding along and it's all beautiful. And then suddenly you get attacked by like 10 of these dogs. And I had no preparation. I didn't know what to do in those situations, so.
Crazy.
Yes, so it was crazy. So that was some of the traumatic, but yeah, I look back now, I laugh, but there was also wonderful thing. I mean, just the camaraderie of the people. The food was amazing. Like I was vegetarian pretty much for the whole time, and actually really changed my diet when I came back. I really realized, what am I doing? There was all this marvelous food that I was eating. Vegetarian, and I pretty much I have a semi-vegan diet now. Actually, that was one of the big things that changed after Nilgiris as well.
And some of those routes are also pretty amazing, right? And all those climbs, including Kalhati.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, the beauty, of these areas that we went through in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, up to Uti, the tea plantations, we did the Kalhati climb, it was beautiful, and I really became an ambassador for the tour and for cycling in India, actually. I'll be back. I think obviously I was actually planning to come back this year in December, but of course with COVID it was cancelled. But hopefully next year I can be back. And of course what it also triggered in me was a real interest in cycling in other parts of India. So I'd really like to go to the north and head up into the mountains and do some riding there. So that's all on my bucket list.
There's some great riding in the lower Himalayas and stuff.
Exactly. But also just, for Deepak and the guys, I think I've done a lot of multi-day stage races around the world, in Italy, in Norway, in different places. It was a really world-class organization. Everything was really well organized. People, the motorbike outriders, the cooks, the port. Everyone was just super, super professional, helpful. Things went well. So I really like that. Although, the other thing you guys didn't tell me, because I signed up for Twin Share, right? So of course, like in Belgium, when you sign up for Twin Share, or in Europe, you have 2 separate beds, man. And then suddenly, I get there and I realize, hang on a second, we check into the hotel room and there's like a double bed, right? And who was the guy? The awesome guy, the mountain bike rider. With the beard, the goatee.
Oh, the
Uh,
Shivain?
was it no the skinny guy, and he finished I think second or third overall that year. Mountain bike. Anyway.
Yeah,
So he's a terrific guy. I remember his name,
yeah.
and we were sharing together. Like so. But the thing about it, right, is like this guy's a teeth grinder, right? So I'm not only am I sleeping in a double bed
But
with this guy, he's
Kiran,
like
KKR.
grinding the teeth. I couldn't sleep, and so I said, listen, I have to find another roommate. So then, eventually I ended up sleeping with Niels,
Okay.
So that was hilarious. So here we like really competing with each other, and then we're sleeping together like brothers, in the bed every night. It was hilarious. It was hilarious, but it was terrific. It was good fun.
Teeth grinder must be Kiran Kumar Raju.
Kiran, it was Kiran. Yeah.
Yes.
Kiran, the teeth grinder. Oh man, never forget that.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's good.
Awesome.
I'm thinking like, and the worst bit is like, I'm thinking we were in the middle of, I don't know where we were. Like we'd gone to Mysore and then we headed off. It was early days, And I'm thinking, I can't. There's no shop around here to buy noise cancelling headphones, Like, so I leave with this guy. But no, so I ended up saying, sorry, Kieran, I gotta go, man.
Awesome. Great experiences. Now, let's come to a little bit of your training. How does your training look like, say, a week or a month or a season cycle?
Yep. It's a good question. I mean, it really does depend on what is the goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is the goal? Is it going to be UCI Grandfondo, full on world championship sort of stuff where you're racing 150 kilometers? That's very different. But I would say there's a few real basic principles around which to base your training, right? And the first thing, of course, is goal setting. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be looking forward. Now, the thing about that is, as I said, as a master cyclist, it's a bit different even to being, say, an under 23 or certainly a professional cyclist, because I think in terms of what I call like micro, macro, and meso cycles, right? So what's the mesocycle? The mesocycle is like that 4-year or even 8-year horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Because Venki, I'm going to be like, I joke with my kids, like I said, look, I'm going to be like cycling until I'm dead, like I'm just going to keep going and going because I want to be competing until into my 80s, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So that gives me also a lot of it makes me relaxed, right? In terms of looking that if this year is too busy or I've got, or if I'm just inspired with my work, then it's okay because so what I do with my coach is a guy called Alan Davis. He's a former professional Australian guy, amazing guy. Is we always keep in mind these mesocycles.
Right.
So for me, actually, that was this year was part of that because in 2021, my goal was to go to the World Masters Games in Japan and to win. Okay, because I'm going up an age group classification to 50.
Yeah.
And then the goal was to go on from the World Masters Games in Japan, and then to target the World, Grandfondo Championships in Bosnia this year in Banja Luka, and also to get a top result there. But the World Masters Games has been cancelled. Okay?
Correct.
So that causes me to reevaluate my goals a little bit. Now, also, I have to say, because of the COVID year this year, I haven't worked pretty much since March. I'm not on contract. I'm not on 9-to-5 salary.
Correct.
So my income is basically evaporated this year, right? My income's down maybe 70-80% on a regular year. So that's also a little bit more in the equation. I need to earn a bit more money next year. So with that in mind, that also, because I haven't been working, I haven't had those same activation of contacts with clients and my network. So actually 2021, I will need to be working a bit more and reactivating again, not just income, but contacts and opportunities.
Right.
So I went back to my coach and said, okay, given that the World Masters Games have been postponed, we moved that cycle to 2022.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I've planned now is for 2021 is pretty much what I did 2019, right?
Okay.
Which means go very fast,
Yeah.
for a short period of
Shorter
time.
period of time. Yeah.
Exactly. So my goals now for 2021 will be, I still go for the world grandfondo championships in Banja Luka. However, I target the time trial.
Right.
Right. So I'm going for a top 10 result in the TT.
Mm-hmm.
I will do the road race because, what I've seen from previous years is that if you're strong enough to be with the best guys in the world for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
it's possible you can make it into a breakaway, or you can go over the first climbs with the best guys
Yeah.
and maybe the 5 to the finish. So I will do the road race,
Right.
but that will be more for fun and for, how do you put it? Like, I'll be opportunistic in the road race.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that I won't be the strongest guy,
Right.
but if I have tactical nous and I've got this very strong 10, 20-minute power, I've got a chance to be in the mix at the end, maybe for a top 15, top 20.
Yeah.
So I'll be there, but the time trial will be the focus.
Yeah.
And then what will then be my goal after that is in October, which is about 6 weeks later, will be the World Track Championships in Los Angeles. And there I will race the 20-kilometer points race. So again, so you see those two goals are very complementary because I'll be training for the time trial.
Yeah. And then the point race. Yeah.
And then the point. So this is really, 20 to 30 minutes of very high power output, but focusing also on aerodynamics, on, lactate tolerance, that kind of stuff. All right. So does that make sense? So they're my big goals.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my early season goal then will be to qualify for Banja Luka. So my plan is to go to Cyprus, which will be end of March, early April, fingers crossed, with vaccines and stuff. And there I will race the time trial. It's a 3-day event in Cyprus. It's a UCI Grandfondo World Series. It's 3 days. I'll do the time trial on the Friday. And then probably skip the Saturday and race on the Sunday, because it's actually a tour. So you race for the overall, but you don't have to do all the stages. So my plan is to rocket in the time trial on the Friday, while everyone else is racing, because you can actually, the Saturday and the Sunday are both individual qualifications for the World Championships. You got a double chance.
Okay. Yeah.
So while everybody is like knocking themselves out on the Saturday, I'll be sitting by the pool with my feet up and relaxing. And then I'll go full gas on the Sunday for a result in the road race, the last stage, to qualify.
Awesome.
So that's what I did. I did that last year, and that paid off. So I'll do the same. Okay. So does that make sense? So that's the kind of goals. And then, so if you imagine what I'm building up towards now will be to be in really good form for late April. Okay. Then why is that? Because also May and June, hopefully the conference and event season will be kickstarting again. So I'm hoping to be busy with my work in May and June, making money. Doing some So also taking a bit of a, because obviously I'll be training very hard between now and April. Okay. So in that period of May, June, I also back off my training to recharge myself physically and mentally.
All right.
And then what I do is start the build up again in July, August for Banja Luka in September.
Correct.
Then I'll take a little bit of a break, and then I'll start doing the more specific training for the track in LA. So does that make sense? That's kind of what the year looks like.
Yes.
Right? So do you want to hear about how I train for that now?
Yes.
So now I can tell you how I train. All right.
Yes.
So the first thing is that obviously, as a master cyclist, there is work that you need to be doing, sort of what I am now, you see, because it's now December and I'm heading for a build up by end of April.
Right.
So that's about 4 months.
Correct.
So what I've been doing for about the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks already. So this is in November, December's phase.
Right.
Is my coach and I do what we call the build phase. It's like a base, we call it base and build, but the base phase, most people think of base phase, the traditional idea is doing lots of kilometers. Right. So they say you base miles. Right. That's a really old school way of looking at things, because when I think about base, the base is preparing your body as a platform for all of the more specific efforts you're going to do later in your training cycle.
Correct.
So actually what I do during the base is very few endurance kilometers. Okay. And certainly very few endurance kilometers at any kind of effort. Now, why is that? Because what I'm working on more during the base, and this is especially important for masters athletes, is muscular power, core strength. Why? Because if you're a masters athlete, or if you're an endurance athlete who's been training for a few years, your endurance base is there, okay? And it's the detraining effect for endurance is much less than the detraining effect for power and intensity, right?
Correct.
Now, also as you age, you have less testosterone, your muscle atrophy happens faster. So what I do during this period is I do a mix of gym work, plyometrics, and core training. And I'm doing 2 to 3 of those sessions in a sort of 8 to 10 day cycle. All right.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I get in the gym, I'll do 5 or 6 different leg exercises, and then I do the plyometrics, like box jumping, vertical jumps, single leg raises, all that stuff. Now, why am I doing that? Because you need to build that muscular power, and you need the hypertrophy. You want your muscles to grow, because then at the mitochondrial level, what you're doing is you're basically preparing that muscularity to convert to power on the bike.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And quite simply, you cannot replicate that on the bicycle. All right.
Right.
That, for example, the explosiveness, that very rapid muscle contraction of something like plyometrics, vertical jumping. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does. It does.
Tell me if I'm boring you, right?
No, that's very interesting, because that is also something that I am looking at right now in strength and conditioning work to complement the bike thing.
Very important. And what you see here is like, there's a big problem, right? And the problem is this: a lot of guys are obsessed with the Stravas and the Training Peaks, and the problem with those kind of platforms is that when you go and you look at your fitness and your form, the algorithms behind those metrics are all endurance biased. All right.
Right.
And they're also biased towards higher intensity work, right? So if you do lots of kilometers in November and December, you're going to see your fitness chart going up, and you feel good. Oh, I'm doing well.
Yeah.
But actually, that's kind of biased, because it's not telling you anything about this muscular power or core strength that you're building, right?
Right.
So I see the opposite, right? While I'm doing this work in the gym and the plyometrics, what's happening to my fitness curve in Training Peaks and Strava? It's going down. Right?
Yeah.
It's going down, as it should be, because I'm doing less of those kilometers. The other thing that's very important here is that when you're doing the gym work and the plyometrics, it's very grueling. I mean, it's hard on your body, right? So you really need recovery. So what I'm doing during this period is really polarized training, right? So what does that mean? I go into the gym, and honestly, man, I mean, when I do I do a warm up on my bike, and then I'll do an hour and a half. Now the gyms have been closed, so I've actually been doing more heavy plyometric workout. I've got a squat rack at home. I'm doing these exercises at home. But the next day, Benki, I can hardly walk up the stairs, man. Like my legs, my ass, it's all sore, right? So what do you need to do on those days? Maybe for me as a master also, it takes you 2 or 3 days to recover from that, right?
Right.
So in those 2 or 3 days, what are you doing? You're riding your bike, but at heart rate zone 1, or maybe lower zone 2, because what you absolutely do not want to do is produce more lactate into your muscles. Right? Because when you produce the lactate into the muscles, that doesn't allow the mitochondria to recover, to respond.
Right.
So that's the mistake that a lot of people make, which is they do these sessions on their bike, but what they do is they do it at heart rate zone 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm not talking about heart rate zone 4 or even 5, definitely not that. But the problem with that is what you don't realize is, and there's a lot of academic studies on this, that even when you're riding at heart rate zone 3, particularly upper zone 3, your body actually is producing low levels of lactate, right? You don't feel it. You can ride at 3 hours at heart rate zone 3, but the lactate's being produced. So what is happening there is you're not allowing your body to fully recover between those, does that make sense? Between those intense sessions.
Right.
So that's been a revelation for me. And that's really been something that I've really moved into in the last 2 or 3 years, is this real polarization of training during particularly this build phase into the base phase. So that's the first phase. That's kind of the base phase for me. And that lasts, as I said, about 8 weeks.
Okay. So when do you give, you said the following 2-3 days, you do very easy bike sessions. Are they like short recoveries kind of sessions, or how do they work?
So what I will do is, for example, the day after, I'll just do an hour, maybe 45 minutes off an indoor trainer, just spin the legs, really, really like, and in terms of wattage for me, that's maybe 100 watts, 120, you know. So for me, you know, a tempo ride for me, like, which would be upper end of heart rate zone 2, that would be about 160 watts.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I get more into the tempo work, zone 3, for example, that's more 210, 220. Right? So these rides are at 100 watts, literally just spinning the legs over heart rate zone 1. So what are you doing there? You're it's called active recovery. Just active recovery, getting legs to another. Then on the days, say day 2 and day 3, you know, I'm doing, and what I do also is I do a lot of split sessions. All right. So I'll do an hour in the morning from 6:30 till 7:30. Then I'll do another hour late afternoon or early evening. But again, what I'm doing here is not going over heart rate zone 2. Right. So a little bit more intense, but again, for me, it would be average heart rate around 115, 120.
Yeah. Okay.
And wattage wise, maybe 150, 160, just turning it over. Okay. So what am I doing here? Now, it's also very interesting if you look at the academic studies on this. So for example, there's some terrific studies out of Norway, coming, both studies done on cross-country skiers, cyclists, and other endurance athletes, that shows actually that when you're doing these sort of semi-endurance rides of 2 hours, 3 hours, at heart rate zone 2, the actual physiological adaptation and benefits of that are basically the same as what you get with zone 3.
Right.
So zone 3 doesn't really do anything for you except put lactate into your system that you don't want right now. Right. So the problem you see, and I mean, Venki, you go and have a look at a lot of your pals on Strava, right? What are they doing? They're doing loads of kilometers at heart rate zone 3, heart rate 135 to 150, you know, something like that. And it's a big fat waste of time. It doesn't do anything for you, right? So that's challenging in a way a lot of people train, right? Which is too many hours.
When do you put your key workouts on the bike then?
So then what it is about is, again, specificity, right? So, you know, what I'm doing here is I'm building the platform, the muscular power, the core strength. And by the way, you know, when you're lifting the heavy weights, again, it's not like on the bike. These are weight-bearing exercises. So you're not just growing your muscles. You're not just triggering that mitochondrial development. You're strengthening your joints. You're strengthening your ligaments, your tendons, because of that weight-bearing exercise. Right. So again, the interesting thing here, as I said, what you will see is during this period, your fitness curve is going down. Your FTP is going down.
Correct. Right?
And the research is clear on this. You know, when you do a weight program, what you can expect to see is not an improvement in FTP, a decline. That's normal, right? That's normal, okay? But what you are building is the benefits that you will see 2 months later.
Correct.
All right. So what I then do is, then I'll be looking at Cyprus. So what I'm starting doing now already is now I'm introducing this base phase, which involves also some on-bike power training. So this morning I did 1 hour easy. This evening, I'll do another hour, 90 minutes with what is called low cadence power.
Okay.
So what does that involve? It involves typically 6x5 minutes where I'm producing a cadence of about 45 reps.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm producing a power which is on my threshold pretty much.
Okay.
Right. So for me, and what I'm doing there also is very important, is remember, we want to minimize the lactate coming into our system. So during these 5 minutes of low cadence power, I'm not allowing my heart rate to go tip into the red, not to go into over threshold.
Right.
Because once you go into the red, you get a big rush of lactic acid. You don't want that still during this phase.
Right.
And that's why also it's just these 5 minutes, right? Because if you go longer than 5 minutes, the lactate will start to build up and pull. So you do 5 minutes. So for me at the moment, that's around 305, 310 watts. All right. So I'm just turning over 45, 310.
Yeah.
Making sure that my heart rate for me is not going over around 168, 170.
Right. Yeah.
If my heart rate does start to creep above that, I drop the wattage.
Okay.
Okay.
And what would be the interval, recovery interval between that?
5 minutes.
5 minutes
right?
on,
So again,
5 minutes off.
Exactly. Because what I'm doing there is this intensity of 5 minutes. And then in that 5 minutes, I do active recovery. Yeah. Again, almost zero wattage, whatever, 80 watts, 100 watts, spinning, just to clear out the lactate. Okay. Yeah. Or the alternative to that, particularly later in the session, is just get off the bike completely. Right. So just literally, I sit, I have some tea or some electrolyte. Yeah. Now, why do you do that? Because the further into the session you go, the more glycogen you've been burning.
Right.
And even if you're just spinning your legs over, you're still burning glycogen.
Right.
So what you want actually is you want your muscles to fully, well, in 5 minutes, they're not going to fully recover. But what will happen is if you're still just relaxed, the glycogen will replenish slightly in your muscles. Okay. So you'll do a stronger workout. All right.
Okay.
So that's what I'll do. So I'll do these 6x5 minutes, and you know, it's hard, but it's not too hard. But what you're doing here is, you imagine it, right? You're teaching your body to produce high power at a relatively low heart rate, because you're not going over threshold.
Yeah. And
the other thing you're doing again is, by the low cadence, what you're doing is you're strengthening your core, you know, your ligaments, your tendons, your joints, because you're producing that, you're having to produce torque, right?
Yeah, muscular endurance.
So, exactly. So what you're doing here is also, you're just really listening to your body. Right. Because of course, you know, if your knee starts to ache or anything, you stop, right? You drop the wattage.
Correct.
Because what is more important here is technique to build the strength and stability. Yeah. But you have to be aware that it is putting this pressure on your joints. Yeah. So you know, I really listen. I'm listening to my body. Like, do I feel a little twinge in my knee, or is it feeling if it does, I immediately back off the wattage there. Right. Okay. So, you know, I'm doing that. Now, then what I also start to introduce is some shocks to my body. All right. So what I start to bring in now is some micro interval work. All right. Now, what is that? What you're now doing is you want to start preparing your body for high intensity. However, what you again want to be doing is keeping your body as free as possible from lactic acid. Because remember, we're still at the moment in this strengthening building phase. Correct. And again, remember what I said, lactic acid, it destroys the benefits. It destroys the advantages, because lactic acid have this negative effect on the mitochondria in your muscles. So what is a micro interval? I mean, I'm sure you've done them before. It's very simple. You know, a basic micro interval protocol would be a 30-15. Right. So what is that? You do a warm up for about 20 minutes. And then when your muscles are fully warmed. Now, by the way, this is better done late afternoon or early evening. Why? Because your resting heart rate is higher then, your core body temperature is higher, and your in a better physiological state for intense workouts. All right.
Okay.
Morning is less good for this. Why? Because in the morning, your core body temperature hasn't yet risen.
Correct.
Your resting heart rate hasn't risen. So morning is good for those sort of endurance, easy rides, but less good for this intensity work.
Okay.
Particularly as you age. So I try to do these middle of the afternoon or early evening.
Okay.
So what you do here is you do basically your warm up, and then you do a 10-minute block. Okay. And what you do in that 10 minutes is 30 seconds, full gas. All right. Now, this is also something which I've learned in the last just couple of years. And again, this is coming out of the latest research on elite performance for pro cyclists. So when you look at these guys like Van der Poel, Alaphilippe, Van Aert, this is the way these guys are training now. All right. Okay. And it actually comes from cyclocross. Right. It comes from athletics as well. They've been doing it for a while. So what are you doing? During this 30 seconds of intensity, you're not doing that at your FTP, right? You know, like in a traditional interval, you do 5-minute interval or 10-minute interval, and you do it at FTP plus 2%. Right. So the whole idea there is what you're doing is you gradually increase your ceiling. You gradually increase your FTP. Yeah. The research shows actually that it doesn't really work. It's not very effective. So the more effective way is to actually shock your system by pushing it well beyond your FTP. Okay. So let's just say, you know, now heading into December, January, my FTP for 1 hour is 300 watts, 310. What I'm then doing is I'm doing this 30 seconds at FTP times 1.4. Okay. Right. Yeah. So you imagine, for me, that's 450 watts, 440 watts. Yeah. That's hard, man. You know, that's hard. But you only do it for 30 seconds. Right. Right. So what you do is for 30 seconds, you ramp up, right? So you roughly know on your indoor, I usually do this indoor trainer because it's much more controlled. Correct. You roughly know that's the cadence, that's the gear that I need to ramp up to that 400 watts. Yeah. So if you're using a smart trainer, you can actually use the ERG mode. Correct. Where you just plug in 400, right? Yeah. So I'll do my 30 seconds at 400, and then what do? You stop. Yeah. You literally stop pedaling, all right, for 15 seconds. Yeah. So what is happening here is quite amazing, because what your body has had is a shock. And within that 30 second, what starts to happen? Towards the end of the 30 seconds, the lactic acid starts getting released. Right. But we don't like lactic acid, Venki. Okay. We don't want lactic acid. Yeah. So what happens in the 15 seconds rest? The lactic acid gets cleared out. Yeah. The body clears out the lactic acid. So you can just be spinning a gear. Yeah. If you want, turning it over, that's good. And then what do? Another 30 seconds. Yeah. At 1.4. Yeah. So you repeat that for 10 minutes. So that's about 13 efforts. Right. Of 30 seconds with those 15-second rests. Yeah. Now, why is this amazing, right? Is because if you look at the average of that 10 minutes, you know, for me, the average I'll have for the 10 minutes might be 330 watts, 340. Right. That's similar to what I would do during a 10-minute interval effort. Right. However, I feel relatively fresh at the end of that 10 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. Because if you had done that 10 minutes as a continuous block at that 300 and, for me, 330 watts level, what's happening towards the end of the 10 minutes? You're dying, right? Because the lactic acid is building and building and building. It's very taxing, very taxing mentally and physically. Yeah. But by doing this 10 minutes of 30-15, 30-15, you give your body this little break. Mentally, it's a little whew. And what then happens also is your body becomes very efficient. And I've been doing this now for a good 2 years, 18 months, this kind of protocol. Your body becomes really good at clearing out the lactic acid, right? It becomes really good at it. Yeah. Right. So what do? You do these 3 blocks of 10 minutes. And between each block, you have 10 minutes rest. And for me, what do I do in that 10 minutes? I get off the bike. I literally have 10 minutes where I have some cha, I have some electrolyte. I might get back on the bike, do a little spin. Right. But what we're aiming to do in this 10 minute is allow our body to replenish those glycogen stores. Right. So that you'll have a quality effort again. Yeah. So that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's a micro. So I'll start doing already maybe one of these sessions about every 7 to 8 days. I bring one of these in because it is taxing, but it starts already introducing your body to that high intensity work.
Right. Right. So do you kind of do it even leading up to the races or close to the races?
Yeah. So I'll talk about how that evolves, right? So remember, what we're talking here is this is the base and the build phase. So the whole objective here is to prepare your body for intensity.
Right.
All right. Now remember, it's easier. The old method was first endurance, then power. No. Right. That's old school.
Right.
The new belief is this: first, develop the ability of your body for intensity, for power. Then layer on top of that later the endurance that you will need. Right now, I'm not saying that I'm not doing any endurance. As I said, I'm doing sometimes, after my gym workouts and my plyometrics, I'm doing these 2 or 3 days where I'm doing maybe 2 or 3 hours in a day on my bike. It's all zone 1 and 2. It's really, really easy. But I'm still doing that endurance. It's still there in my body.
Right.
So what shifts now, is that, let's just say now we're getting into March, into April, and I'm coming up now for Cyprus. So what I'm doing now is I've been bringing in more of the micro interval sessions. But remember, why am I doing the micro intervals? Because again, I'm saving my body from lactate.
Right.
All right. Because here's the thing. If you think about your body, you're almost like you think about your body being 2 halves, right?
Right.
One half of your body is the power, is the intensity, is the muscularity. The other half of your body is the endurance. And what we start now talking about is real power endurance, right? Which is then being able to ride for 3 hours at 270, 290 watts, which is what you'll need just to be in the mix of those races. Okay. The problem is you can't develop both of those sides of your body at the same time.
Right.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
All right. You just can't do it. It's just too grueling on your body, right?
Correct.
So you have to be doing one or the other.
Right.
More or less. All right.
Yeah.
So what I start to do then is, and again with the guidance of my coach, is as we start getting closer to the event, we then start to bring in more training that replicates the event.
Okay.
All right. So if I'm going for the time trial in Cyprus, now that's going to be, I think, 22 kilometers.
Right.
That is going to be an effort of around, for me, 30 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So what am I going to start bringing in? What I'm going to start bringing in now, probably about 6 weeks before, is I'm going to start bringing in some intervals, which are those 2 by 15 minutes, right?
Right. Yeah.
2 by 15 minutes. Right. So what I'm then starting to prepare myself is more the actual replication of the effort.
Correct.
Right. And that will expose my body to more lactate. But that's okay, because what I'm now phasing out, I'm phasing out the gym work. I'm phasing out the plyometrics. I'm phasing out that sort of heavy stuff.
Right.
So I'm starting to move my body now more towards this kind of intensity, because again, that will take recovery.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I'm then starting to do is, now this will typically be for me about 5 to 6 weeks before the target event, is I will now start bringing in also some more endurance, sort of, I would call it endurance tempo work.
Okay.
Right? Now, what does that mean? So what I will do is, this will be, say, March. I will start racing here in Belgium. Right? But I won't be racing to win. I'll be racing to get my body used to racing.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? Here in Belgium, there are different federations, but typically what happens is, let's say I go and race with one of the Flemish federations. They will have the Masters race, which will be a race of usually 60 or 70 kilometers. That's my age group. Okay.
Yeah.
Then after my race, half an hour later, they start the elite, the open guys. So these are the 18 to basically 35-year-old guys. That'll be the open race. So what I'll do, Venki, is, and some guys think I'm crazy, but I do it. I race the Masters race, not to win, just to sit in the peloton. Just to sit in the peloton.
Yeah.
Right? Now, why? Because just to sit in the pack, that race is going to take about an hour and a half. Okay. Average speed 42, 43 kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
But all I do is sit in the pack, and just to sit in the pack, I'm going to have to produce a power of 250, 260 watts.
Right.
Okay. Just to sit in the pack, right?
Yeah.
That's all I do. That's all I do. But what is that doing now? That's giving the shock to my body, because I'm going to be probably in heart rate zone 4 there.
Yeah.
Okay. My body's like, what the heck are you doing to us, Jamie? But you do it. Then I'll have the half an hour break.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll do exactly the same in the elite race, in the amateur race, the open race, right?
Right.
Now, again, but in that race, I probably won't be in the breakaway or in the front group. I'll be just sitting with the chasing peloton.
Right. Yeah.
So normally what I'll do early in the season is so the Masters race will be 60 kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
The open race will be maybe 80.
Yeah.
Right. So for the early season, I don't finish that second race. I only do half of it.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So I will get about 100 kilometers.
Right.
All right. But I'll get 100 kilometers at 250 watts,
right.
260 watts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's amazing here, Venki, is that in terms of adaptation, if I do that every weekend for 3 weeks,
mm-hmm.
okay, by the 4th week, I do the full race with the Masters. I do the full race open. I get 140 kilometers.
Yeah.
And my body is like, okay, Jamie, it's like, we get it. All right.
Yeah.
We get it. All right. So you're basically then preparing your body to be able to do that 3 hours.
Right.
Without cramping. Because if you don't do that, if I don't do that, what's going to happen? I go to a grandfondo World Series qualifier, like Casablanca this year. Where I didn't do it actually. I really just wanted the TT, and the road race I just went for luck. I had a good result, but I did get in the breakaway, right? So in Casablanca this year, I hadn't done these long kilometers because this was February. I'd been really training for the time trial. I won the time trial on the Friday
mm-hmm.
or the Thursday. Then I went into the road race on the Saturday, which is 110 kilometers. Mm-hmm. I got into the breakaway with like 5 guys, right? Because I had this power. But man, I tell you, in the last 20 kilometers of that race, every muscle in my body was cramping. Everything was cramping.
Because
I made it to the
shock.
It was a shock. My body wasn't ready for it.
Right.
So that's sort of, and again, that's what a lot of guys don't get, right? Because what a lot of guys do is they do all of this kind of endurance power work, all this endurance work over the winter. And then they try to introduce the intensity closer to the race, right? Whereas you should be doing the opposite, actually.
What you're talking about sounds like a reverse polarization, right?
Exactly. That's the technical term for it. Yeah, reverse polarization.
Yes.
Yeah, and what I've seen is that, but again, I think the more kilometers you have under your belt, the more years you have as a road rider, the more that endurance base is there, and the faster it comes back. But like I said, with me, it's usually within 3 to 4 weekends of doing this, my body adapts. It adapts. And then what will happen? So what am I doing then? Basically what I'm doing then is the closer I get to the event, I've built up that power endurance now. So I will stop that about 14 days, 10 to 14 days before the race.
You're tapering.
Why? Tapering. All right. All I'm doing then is getting all of that fatigue, everything out of my body. And what I'm basically then just moving towards are micro interval sessions.
Again,
the micro intervals I described for you, I basically do those, okay? Because what that does is it primes your engine again for intensity, but it does that in the absence of lactate.
Without the fatigue.
You can recover, you can eradicate your fatigue, and you can still have that intensity there. Difference, however, is what we then start to do is close to the event again, I adapt the micro-interval protocol. And this was shared with me, this technique by Michael Rogers, who was the former multiple world time trial champion. So Michael Rogers, he finished his career with Team Sky, and the coach there was Tim Kerrison, the famous Australian coach who coach Wiggins and Froome and Richie Port and all those guys.
Right.
So what Kerrison did, and remember he came from swimming, right? Was that what Kerrison could see was that in swimming, for example, right? In the shorter events, 200 meters, for example.
Yeah.
The guys would go and they would go hard, but they would go at a very consistent pace. All right. So what he started doing with the Aussie swimmers is in these events, he trained them to go absolutely full gas for the first 50 meters.
Right.
Right. And then to get ahead of the other guys, to take a little bit of a breather, let them catch up a little bit. And when you recover, be ready to go again.
Right.
But back to the level which those guys have been sustaining. Right. So if you think about this in the context of cycling,
yeah.
How do you see that in a race, right? How you see that in a race is you see how the guys at Sky or Ineos take on a climb in the Tour de France. What do? At the base of the climb, they go full gas.
Yeah.
Full gas. Now, they've trained for that because what Kerrison introduced to them is these very high short lactate efforts of about 45 seconds to a minute, right? Where they're not doing 450 watts, right? They're doing 550 or 600, but just for 45 seconds.
Yeah.
What they then do is you take 45 seconds, a minute, relatively easy, and then you go to your tempo, which might be as a professional 400 watts or 380.
Right.
For me as an amateur, it's maybe 330.
Right.
Okay. So what I train myself for is this, Venki, right? Is kind of like those guys in Sky or Ineos. So what I now do is with my micro interval protocols, I do my 20-minute warm up.
Yeah.
Then what I do is before the first 10-minute block, I do 1 minute progressive to max.
Oh.
Right. So I produce for that 1 minute over 500, 600 watts.
Okay.
About 45 seconds, right? So just to the point where you start feeling the lactate coming, but full gas, right?
Yeah.
Then what do? You take roughly 1 minute, easy pedaling, and then you go straight into the 10-minute block, all right? So what does this do? This gives you the ability, it trains your body to follow the strongest guys at the base of the climb or even to attack at the base of a climb.
Right.
Because if your competitors, even if they've been doing the micro interval efforts, even if they've been doing the traditional interval, 6 by 5 minutes or 3 by 10 minutes, if they have not trained these high lactate efforts, what happens? They panic because they see you attacking up the road. So they try to stay with you.
Yeah.
And what happens when they try to stay with you, their system is not trained to do that.
Correct.
So they get a big spike of lactate that their body is not trained to clear.
Yeah.
Right?
They're not used to that surge.
No. Yeah. And so what happens is they go into the red and they never get out of the red. You push them into the red and they stay in the red. And that's what you see, if you think about what Team Sky and Ineos did, they would blow some of the best climbers in the world within the first few kilometers of a climb because those guys would get into the red at the base and they would never recover from that, right?
Correct.
So, but Venki, these are our secrets, okay?
No one will.
Don't tell these secrets to anybody, all right?
Yeah.
Don't tell these secrets.
Great insights, Jamie. That was really insightful about your training and how it goes, how you use the reverse periodization to get in shape.
Look, the other thing there, Benki, is honestly the thing that I discovered, and I was amazed, right? Because I'm turning 50, and I've been introducing these new protocols over, like I said, the last 18 months or so, with the guidance of my coach, and I've been blown away because I still see improvements. I'm almost 50, and and also what was amazing for me were the micro intervals because I actually saw after doing these micro intervals for example, when I first introduced them. So just for example, this year before Casablanca, where I won the time trial, third in the road race overall, not just for the Masters, but overall in the road race. I did 5 micro interval sessions before the time trial in that sort of period of about 14 days before. Every 2 or 3 days I was doing bigger intervals, and then nothing, easy riding. I saw my FTP increase by 5%. So my FTP was 5% better in that time trial in Casablanca than I'd ever seen before.
Wow.
You know,
that is something.
So that's really something, you know. Yeah. And the other thing about it was in Casablanca, we had a time trial circuit, which was out and back with 8 times. So it was out back.
So okay.
So
short circuit.
Very short circuit.
Yeah.
Out and back. So each time we went out, we had to corner, we had to brake, and we had to accelerate again.
Yeah. And that will come in very handy.
And that's exactly what the micro interval session trains, right? Because it trains from, you know, up, down, to up. So down to up. Yeah. So exactly there. So I really believe in that. But what I will do for your show notes as well, thank you. I mentioned some of these academic studies, like from some of the researchers in Norway, and I'll share some of that with you, and you can share with the listeners.
That would be perfect. That would be perfect.
It's really good. It's there. Yeah.
Thanks, Jamie. I know you are looking to do other stuff in the day, but let us it's been a great valuable inputs, but let us end with some more tips that you would like to give working athletes to do well both at work and their sport.
You know, I guess the first thing is be realistic with your goals. You know, be realistic with your goals. So you know, look at the time you have available. You know, your level of energy, your level of commitment, and set goals which are realistic, you know, and like I said, you know, look, I fully acknowledge that I can't win 160 kilometer world championship races every year. You know, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So some years I decide I'm going to go fast for 20 kilometers, and then I base my training goals around that. So be realistic with the goals. The second thing there is not just about the time you have available, but, you know, be realistic with what kind of rider you are, right?
Yeah.
So what's your physiology? You know, if you're a 90 kilogram powerhouse, then, you know, maybe doing the Transalp is not for you. You know, like a Transalp is this multi-day race in France, this crazy one where you do like 4,000 altitude meters every day, right? I mean, that's going to kill you.
Yeah.
So, you know, also look at your physiology. You know, are you a punchy rider? Are you a climber? You know, what is it? Now, again, you know, I'm a roulier. You know, I can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I'm not a pure climber, and I'm not the strongest guy on the road. So I set my goals very much around what suits my capabilities as well. That's the second thing.
Yeah.
Very important. The third thing, you know, if I said it, is just, you know, acknowledge that it's not just about you, you know, it's about the we, and make sure that your goals and the objectives that you set yourself fit with your family, you know, and with your partner, and that you've talked about that, and that those sort of expectations are understood and are realistic. Very important, right? Because that matters. That's the third thing. The fourth thing is get creative. Get creative with your training. All right. Now, what do I mean by that? You know, a lot of people say to me, Venki, I don't have the time to train. Okay. If you're a knowledge worker, right, now it's different if you're like a surgeon, you know, like, or you're, you know, you're someone who's really working with your hands, or you're on a production line or something like that. Okay. It's different because you physically have to be there all the time. But for many knowledge workers, we work in our heads, right? So to give you an example, I typically wake up every morning, and from 6 till 7, 6 or 7:30, I do an hour on my indoor trainer before I start my work day.
Yeah.
But what am I doing when I'm on my indoor trainer? You know, I'm not playing some video game like Zwift. No, what I'm doing is I'm doing my email, right? So I have a Microsoft Surface. I've got the tablet holder on my handlebars. So I'm scanning my emails. I might be editing a PowerPoint presentation. You know, I actually tried responding to emails with voice dictation, but that was a disaster. You know, I was sending really embarrassing messages to people. So I don't, you know, so I can scan my emails. I can edit a PowerPoint document. I can read some articles. You know, if I'm teaching, which I still do some visiting teaching, I can grade some student papers. All right. So you can do a lot on an indoor trainer, right? Okay.
Yeah.
However, you know, you can only do that when you're doing these easy kilometers, right? You know, exactly. You know, I'm not trying to do a micro interval session while at the same time being in a Zoom call, you know? I mean, that's not going to work, you know?
Yeah.
People are going to look at you on the Zoom call sweating and, no, that's not good, not good. Okay.
Yeah.
So just acknowledge that, you know, as a worker, and particularly someone working from home, you have different levels of cognitive work.
Yeah.
You know, you got level 1 and 2 cognitive work, which is really easy. Scanning your emails, yes and no questions, working on a PowerPoint presentation. That's easy. Yeah?
Yeah.
When you get into the really hard stuff, you know, like having a conversation, a brainstorming session with your colleagues on a Zoom call, well, you can't really do that while you're doing interval sessions, you know. Okay.
Right.
But I do WhatsApp calls on my bike. Eh?
Mm-hmm.
I do them in the morning with colleagues and stuff like that. Okay. So that's get creative, right?
Yeah.
And related to that, get creative is I'm a big believer in split workouts.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
Again, speaking with guys like Michael Rogers, the research they did at Sky, what they discovered, there's very little difference between doing a 3-hour continuous ride and 3 times 1 hour rides spaced out during the day.
Wow.
The physiological benefits are basically the same. And in fact, what they actually discovered at teams like Sky was that there are some advantages with split training.
Okay.
So what they showed actually was your body, in terms of fat breakdown and weight loss, there are advantages in split training. Right? You get bigger weight loss advantages by splitting your training than by doing a continue. It's got something to do with the fat burning metabolism.
Okay.
That if you get into a steady state,
yeah.
it's different to doing these 3 separate shocks to your system, right?
Right.
Going from, you know, that's how it works. I don't know the science behind it, but apparently it's effective. So don't be afraid to split your sessions. Okay.
Right.
That's the thing, to do that effectively. The 5th thing, very importantly, is that realize that building your fitness, you know, and is not just about what you do on the bike, right? So what I've talked about a lot today already is the gym work, the plyometrics. Yeah. Okay. If you go to an office, maybe you have a gym across the road, or you know, you can do plyometrics on stairs. You can have a box, a table you can jump onto. You know, there's stuff like that. So, you know, I do a lot of in the off season. I do swimming. I do hiking. So get that step counter, you know, and realize that you can be working on your fitness as well. So again, it's about being creative, you know, building up your fitness levels there. Yeah. Super important. And also that's very important for mental freshness. You know, I'm always keeping very aware of my mood, my motivation, and don't be afraid to have a few days off. You know, don't be afraid. Just be very conscious of keeping those 3 balls in the air. And if you start feeling tired and run down and moody, take a couple of days rest. All right? Let yourself get better. So they're my five tips.
Oh man, brilliant, Jamie. This has been a fantastic couple of hours. Thank you for so many great insights, and thank you for taking the time out and spending the time with the Working Athlete podcast.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, Venki. And of course, any of those of you watching this, I mean, please, of course, subscribe to Venki's channel because it's awesome. There's lots of great talks in here. But of course, also do subscribe to This Cycling Life, which is the channel that I'm hosting. Got lots of interesting stuff on.
Absolutely.
I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. So in the show notes, maybe Venki will provide people with the LinkedIn contact info. So if any of you do have any questions or comments, you know, you connect with me on LinkedIn. And of course, also do link up with us on Strava. That'd be great too.
Super. I will provide you the links for the Cycling Life and your LinkedIn profile and everything in the show notes. That would be awesome.
Sounds great. Good. Okay, Venki. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thanks, Jamie.